It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harbour.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. My name is Mike Harbour, and joining me today is my co-host, Paul Gustafson. Hey, Paul, how are you, my friend?
Mike, doing great. Great to be here with you today, and I'm excited about our topic.
Yeah, this is going to be a great conversation today. Joining us as well as our friend Rick Morris. He's going to dive deeper with us in our leadership discussion as we continue in this season focused on the mindset of a breaking average. We're having a conversation with leaders who are stepping out of comfort zones, being different than the status quo, and breaking average in how and where they lead.
I'm excited because Rick interviewed Barb Stegemann, and she's no stranger to this podcast. We had her in season 1. Here we have her in season 2, and a great interview. So looking forward to listening in on that.
Yeah, it's going to be a great discussion that Rick had with Barb. Let's jump right in and learn from Barb Stegemann in this interview. We hope you guys enjoy this.
Rick Morris here with the Breaking Average podcast with one of my favorite people, bar none, of all time. She is the founder, CEO of Seven Virtues Perfume, or Seven Virtues, the star of Perfume Wars, and a great and dear friend now, Barb Stegemann. How you doing, Barb?
Hey, great, Rick. How are you?
Doing fantastic. So I'm now just inventing reasons to talk to you, and this is a new one to do so.
Thought so, but I grab everyone. I love talking to you. So I'm playing the game with you too, Rick. Anytime you want to talk to me, I'm in.
I appreciate that. So, we're talking about breaking average, and one of those things that I think brings us to breaking average is really overcoming difficulties. What are some of those early difficulties that you felt like you needed to overcome to really become who you are?
Oh gosh, where to start? I mean, a hearing impairment, poverty. I think poverty. I think having absolutely less than no resources was very difficult as a child. And it taught me to be very creative. It taught me to work really hard. And it taught me to never believe that I couldn't. And I remember in grade 4, you started getting rewarded money for your grades. And so I worked so hard. And I remember one year in grade 5, I could barely sit down. I was called back up again to come get my envelope of money, $2, $3, because I had reached the highest marks. I was never the smartest kid in the class. I didn't have the highest IQ, but I worked really hard because I wanted that money. And so that would allow me to do the things I wanted to do. Even joining 4-H, which is it teaches you how to farm and floriculture, flowers. Going to the fair, I wanted the red ribbon and the money that went with that. And so it was just this notion that I don't have to be poor. I can work hard at the age of 8, 9, 10, believing that I could earn my own money and I could buy the things that I want. And so, yeah, a lot of resilience in that, because normally you sort of buy into a myth, oh, you're poor, that's your life. I never thought that. I never felt that way.
And so you mentioned hearing impaired, and I think that's something relatively new that I just learned about you and all the times that we've talked. Was that tough, growing up, especially with kids and everything else?
It was tough because it was undiagnosed. So I'm really loud and I read your body language because I think everyone's hearing impaired. And I mean, they gave me glasses. We were so poor. You wonder how kids slip between the cracks, right? Oh, she's hearing impaired. Give her glasses. And, all the headaches. And, it wasn't until I was 21 that I was in my first hearing test. And she said, you don't pass the test. And the technician was absolutely shocked. But she said, you've learned to read body language. And this has been your way of reading, because remember, 90% of communication is nonverbal. And so what a gift all my life, even though people always sort of judged me and thought I was very intense, because of course I think everyone can't hear. So I want to get in your face and make sure that I read your lips and that you can hear me, because I think you must have the same problem as me, because we all think everyone's like us. And so, but it was a great gift because it taught me how to read if someone's really sad. And they might say they're really brave and strong, but I could see in the face, maybe they're not all right. And what could I do to make them feel better? And that's always been a gift. Kind of gives me a frog in my throat, because I didn't really realize I was cultivating that. It just became a natural part of my life. So there were great gifts in that, but there were difficulties. I'd be in class undiagnosed, and I remember we all have that memory of that terrible day in school.
Absolutely.
There's quite a few of them. They're the worst one ever. And I remember a substitute teacher came in, my teacher, who just kind of understood my family situation, was very gracious and knew I was smart. I knew that I worked hard and valued that. Some substitute teacher came in, and of course I couldn't hear. I was in the back of the room, and I asked a question because I was distracted. I heard other kids talking about something, so I completely misunderstood what she was saying. And she actually said, "What's wrong with you? Are you stupid?" I'd never been treated like that by my teachers. My teachers were so gracious to me, but obviously they were used to me. And I remember just thinking, some people won't understand you, and that's okay. You got to make sure that you find the people that understand you and help them lift you, and together. And there will always be someone that doesn't get you, and that's okay. And that was a very early on lesson in understanding that, some people aren't going to get you, and that's all right.
It's amazing to me as we talk. So you talked about poverty, you talked about hearing impairment, but you always end that on a high note. Like with all the things that you went through as a child and the things that have happened to you. I mean, you even got made fun of, and spoiler alert, you got made fun of when you went on to Dragon's Den and became one of the first women. With all of that, how are you not bitter? Like I'll do it from a personal perspective. Like when somebody tells me I can't do something, I'm going to work twice as hard just to show them that I can. Right. But it's not always the purity of heart. It's more, I told you so, than it is, this is something I need to do. How have you gotten this amazing perspective on life through all of that?
Well, I've developed a process, and it's probably a confluence of my parents, my family, what I got, what I didn't get, my faith. But I think that I'm a reflector. I reflect. And I think that's always been a very important gift. And I hope everyone finds ways to reflect, because when we reflect, we don't react. That's a great term. Reflect, don't react. Yeah. I mean, that's really important.
Yeah, I'm going to take, I trademark that. I'm stealing that. Yeah, go ahead.
Just buy me dinner with all your money and we'll be good. To reflect and not react. And we often have flashbacks. We'll have a flashback. I don't know how, over a conversation the other day, having dinner with my husband. We started talking about something, and all of a sudden I was having this flashback to when I was a child. I was graduated from high school, actually. I was so young, and I wanted to go to university and study journalism and philosophy, and they had this great school called King's, and it was part of Dalhousie, and my guidance counselor told me that they didn't have applications. And so we were poor. My mom couldn't call and say, get her an application. So I got in a bus, spent the $30, went all the way to Halifax, the big city, got the application, jumped back on the bus, and only applied to that school because that's where I belonged, despite what my guidance counselor said. And then fast forward, I get to the school, I get in. I remember the letter when I read it on my dirt road when it arrived, and I yelled out loud, I screamed, one of those first times that you scream with joy and there's no one around you, Yeah. And we always remember those moments. And when I arrived at King's, there was no one else from my grade at my school at King's except one person. It was the guidance counselor's daughter.
Wow.
And I thought, my first thoughts were, obviously she got the application, but that wasn't my first thought. It was, she's all by herself. She has no friends. That made me sad for her, because I had a lot of friends. And I showed up with, no sheets for my bed, $5 in my pocket. But of course, the joke I always share is I spent my last $5 on a 6-pack, and my life began back then. A 6-pack of beer cost $5. But I shared it with my friends, the loaves and fishes. Always share what little that you have, and you'll be fine. So I fast forward, I come back home. I win an award for economic development. I was working for a city. And my mom said that my Latin teacher felt I should have gotten the scholarship to King's, not the other girl. And I thought, what scholarship? So then it got worse. Obviously, there was a reason why this gentleman was trying to keep me from getting the scholarship, and it was also based on income. So I probably would have qualified, not just my marks, but also not having much and all my volunteer work that I did. And I was having dinner this past weekend back home with an old girlfriend of mine. And I shared with her this flashback I had to it. And I said, I really hope she's all right. And we looked her up, and she's got a beautiful life. And I just wanted to make sure she turned out okay. And that's all my flashback led to. And it was very healing to know that she was all right. And that she has a good life. And how I process that is I reflect. I think, you can think on a micro level. Think how sometimes you're like absolutely furious. We've all been there. You've been mistreated in customer service, or something's happened. No one's listening to you. You're getting the runaround. You're ready to just explode. But if you wait 24 hours, you don't feel the same way. You know what I mean?
That's
like that
true.
moment, you just want to be like, this is unacceptable. You can't do this. But 24 hours, you've had some time to reflect. See a little differently. Maybe there's a different way to write that or share that. And so I always say take 24 hours when you're upset about something before. So if you apply that to your life, that would be 33 years ago that this happened, reflecting for 33 years, and then opening that wound up, which can be difficult. And when you're ready to open that wound up and heal it by having an outlook of, I hope they turned out all right too. And they did. And isn't that wonderful? And so having good friends that I could talk to about this privately felt really good. And now it's closed. It had been a little bit of an open wound that was there. I wasn't angry about it, but I let it, and the other thing is don't pull at it. Let it sit there. You can come back to it. This notion that you have to always deal with every issue. No, you don't. You can park it. It's there. It's not going anywhere. That's been my way to reflect and not react. And things are going to come at you. That's okay. Life's not always going to go to plan. That's all right.
But you're literally the living parable of life can happen to you or for you, right? And a lot of people could take that experience and just the world's out to get me. How dare that person? And instead, you seem to be able to flip on a dime anything that you've come across, and I think that's a huge proponent to breaking average.
Yes, I mean, the victim chic, the being cool, being a victim doesn't work for me. There's nothing cool about being a victim. Absolutely nothing at all. In fact, Schadenfreude, people will take pleasure in your pain. So don't talk about it. You can talk with good friends and resolve things. I get that, but that's different. This whole victim chic, posting your disaster that happened that day on social media, so everybody feels sorry for you. The high or thrill of the likes that you get, you have to really dig deep and realize that they're taking pleasure in your pain. So don't act like a victim. No one actually likes it. And it doesn't help anyone. Now, what you can do is take that constructively. So for example, I've talked to other teachers about the importance of making sure that guidance counselors are not performing like that anymore. And I've come to learn that there's still some behavior like that. So I've spoken, because I speak to schools, and talked to different administrators just about the importance of making sure that we're ensuring that the guidance counselors are lifting every child, not just the red shiny apples, and making sure that programs are modernizing in that level, right?
Sure. Would you explain to the audience what ROL means?
Yes. Well, we all know what ROI means, the return on investment. What's your return on investment? And no one goes, what's your ROL? What's your return on love? What are you doing to make the world a better place? We all know the more you give, the more you get. And just leading with a return on love and a vision to create a better world, to create a company that is fostering goodness in the world and enabling and empowering and giving people dignity and equality, then the results are always return on investment. The ROI will always follow, and there's guaranteed principles to this that go back hundreds of years. And we've all lived this experience on some level where we gave the last thing we had, and then the sky just have opened up, and you didn't really ask for it, and you didn't want it, and all of a sudden people are helping you, and all you wanted to do was help one person with one thing. And it's absolutely mind-blowing that the universe is built this way. And I think the other thing, I know we were in return on love, but just back to the earlier subject on keeping an attitude of resilience when things aren't going your way. When someone tries to cause you difficulty or get in your way, I think you don't have to do anything to them. The universe will take care of them. So you don't have to be the one to be mean or vengeful, because that's just going to hurt your heart and who you are in the future. But know that the universe will take care of them, and that behavior will be, what's the word I'm trying to find? They will be disciplined, and the natural order will take care of that. So you don't have to get angry.
Yeah, I love that, because personally for me, that was a lesson I had to learn. You know,
Okay.
early on in my career, early on in my company, I felt like people were taking advantage of situations. And I remember this one employee that, I mean, I went after hard, and really, I'm Italian. So the
Oh, the
Italian came
passion.
out, and I was like, you have stepped on the family, right? So it was total mob justice. And I saw him several years later, and he really hadn't improved any of his situation. And I felt horrible for what I had done, and got a chance to talk with him, and we let things go,
Nice.
and kind of buried the hatchet. But that was a huge learning process that I had experienced, that hurt on my heart, because it bothered me, because it wasn't who I was.
No.
But I was upset, and I was vengeful in that scenario.
Right.
And it's just something that I think is a lesson some people have to learn, but it's a fantastic lesson that
Right, when you were
the world will
younger,
take care of them. Yeah.
you were younger, and that's a natural thing that happens in our youth. So we can't beat ourselves up over it. And then you helped him, which is really lovely, and learn from it, which is the most
Yeah.
important thing, because we all have those experiences. So do I, that where I didn't behave in maybe the way I should have, because we're young, and then we learn from it. And that's the main thing, isn't it?
Sure. So we have this acronym victory that we talk about all the
Mm.
time, and that was in this wonderful book that's actually titled Breaking Average, that Paul Gustafson pulled together with a lot of collaborating authors. So it stands for vision, insight, collaboration, trust, ownership, resilience, and the S factor.
I love
I
that
think we've
acronym.
covered resilience. I think we got resilience down.
Yeah.
But what word really speaks to you right now in this phase of life?
I think the word that really speaks to me is insight. You know, you can correspond that to instincts and wisdom. You know, insight is that thing we have as we age, as we have experiences, bad experiences, good experiences, and having an insight into something is really crucial. You can't teach that. You can't buy that. Having that ability to have an insight into a situation and know what to do. You know, and it's in our world right now, we've got a pandemic on. In my industry, they've gone down 13% in sales, and we're up 22%. And I really feel that the most important thing for us has been my insight. So and my husband and my son always laugh, because they always say that I have incredible instincts. And I think it's because of the hearing impairment, right? Reading body language for so long has trained me for 51 years to read what's really happening. And so my instincts are pretty sharp, even though I'm in an industry that I didn't come from. I came from a journalism background, and suddenly I'm in the beauty world, but it's the same application. It just manifests itself differently. And, you know, I'll do things like, we may be almost completely finished on a project, and I'll wake up in the middle of the night, and the insight, my instincts, my intuition will go, no, it can't be that way. And then I won't tell everyone what I need to do, and I'll go work with the key person that can help me create what I need to show everyone. Rather than talk about it, I need to show you all, because I've taken you too far down now. So we don't want to have any more discussions around it. So I'll go and work on something fast and furiously, and come back and present it and say, you know, I think this is the direction we need to go in. So it's not just words. And I think when you have an insight into something, particularly when you're further along down the road, which happens, a lot of people are afraid to speak up, or we've invested too much money. It's like, well, you have to speak up with your insight, because this is a long game. It's the long game. You really have to make sure that you're taking care of everybody longer term. And some of those decisions, you know, if you don't follow your insights, then you can make big mistakes, big blunders, especially during trying times like a pandemic.
So how could this tribe of people and followers of Breaking Average, and people that listen to this podcast, how can we serve you?
Oh my goodness. Oh, I never thought about that. I mean, you can subscribe to barbstegemann.com, and I can share what's going on in our journey, and I can answer people's questions. You can write me, and maybe someone wants to talk further about some of the things we touched on today. And I write everybody back personally. I love that. I'm a lot like you, Rick. We just let you know, people are brought to us for a reason, and we're here for one another.
So my final question is, one of my favorite personal stories of you, and I got to witness this firsthand, but we're at lunch with John Maxwell, and he asked you similarly the same question, and you had a really, really simple, easy goal. And what was that you shared with him?
Yes, he wanted to know what we all wanted in the world. And I said, I want to end corruption. And his jaw kind of dropped, and I went, "Are you with me, John?"
Yeah.
And that was it. He turned around and he goes, "We're organizing a dinner for tonight." And you could tell half his big level team was all going, "Oh, we had plans. Oh my God, we're going to move things around." And I got to sit beside him and really talk about some ways. And he has avenues to do that. And it felt like just a great connect. And so that really mattered to me.
Yeah, you definitely took him aback with that one. So I just want to end corruption on every level. So you with me? It's
something off the side of my desk.
Yeah.
Oh, I won't leave this earth until we have at least taken a big dent out of it. So I think I'll be here for a while, but I'm up for it.
Well, Barb, I love talking to you. We got to bring you back because I think we could do a whole segment on cathedral thinking, but I'm going to leave that as a teaser.
You're such a tease.
That was a teaser. But I think we could do a whole segment on that, but we appreciate you taking the time. We always love when you speak into us. And I always love the opportunity to hang out with you.
Thank you, Rick. Me too. You have me anytime you need me, honey.
Oh, thank you.
Wow, what a great interview. Barb is so inspiring. I remember having lunch with her as about a year ago now, Paul, when we met her in Orlando, Florida. She was one of the finalists for the John Maxwell Leadership Award that we were a part of. But what was fun is listening to Rick talk with her. He's in studio with us. It's the man, the myth, and working on legend status. Rick Morris, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing wonderful. How about you, sir?
I'm doing good. Doing good. Tell us, catch us up on what's going on in your world.
Things are still, we're spinning up companies. We're trying to pivot out of COVID and just trying to continue to, I really think with COVID and the shutdown, it's what we're doing right now that's really going to see who's going to emerge and not emerge. And so it's been a battle of wills, but make sure that we're getting up, we're focused, and pushing through every single day, because whatever we're doing today, those results come out 6 to 9 months from now. And so in 6 to 9 months, I want to be ready to reap.
Yeah, that is great word. It is definitely the year of the pivot. And for our listeners, what, Rick, he just gave you some gold advice. Where do you want to be in 6 months? And you got to do that today. You can't wait until you get there to do that. You got to make the pivots today, the shifts that will get you there. And, that just segues right into what we want to talk about today, taking charge, right? As leaders, we have to take charge of our future. And we just heard a great discussion between Rick and Barb Stegemann that sets the table for our topic today around taking charge. We want to just have a conversation about what taking charge means, what is it, why it's important. Rick, why don't you just get us started around that thought today?
Absolutely. And Barb being such an inspiration, really coming through tragedy. If you guys haven't had the opportunity to go see Perfume Wars, you can Google it. But it's a documentary on how Barb came through, and built this company, and it documents her friend that was nearly killed by a Taliban. It moved me to tears. I mean, it's an amazing, amazing story. And how gracious is she? Just anytime we reach out, she shows up for us. So we appreciate that. For me, taking charge, though, is really about that initial momentum, right? So my focus is always in getting started. John Maxwell says everything in life worthwhile is uphill, but most of us have downhill habits. But in my journey, not only is that a big quote, but I also like the Carl Jung quote, right? Unless you make the subconscious conscious, it'll rule your life and you will call it fate. And then Dr. Rome, who's another inspiration in my life and mentor to me, talked about how I started, my ID personality. I can really start well. but I need that extra push to finish sometimes. And so all of this led me to a big visualization exercise. And for those of you that are watching this on video, this little guy right up here is Sisyphus, right? And so the Sisyphus to me is, is that constant pushing the rock up the mountain. And when you have that huge boulder, it's the start that really requires the most effort. But you have to keep that momentum going in order to continue to push the rock up the mountain. And there's so many moments in my day or week where distractions creep in, right? So each morning I create a list of key things that I need to do to get done. That's my rock that I've got to get up the hill. But then phone calls, emails, distractions, the way my brain is wired is my mountain. So each time I'm crossing things off the list, right, I'm pushing. And each time a distraction wins, I've stopped for just even a breath, and that rock is pushing me right back down. And I can feel the struggle within my own brain. But even, it's funny, I wrote a blog post about this, and in the blog post, I was like, wouldn't it be cool to have a little Sisyphus like desk ornament or something like that to remind me to keep pushing? And that cost me 30 minutes of searching on the internet. But, hey, there it is. I got it. It's a real thing. I won. But the point being, and back to the thought, is we all have this thing inside of us, right? We all have the want to succeed, but do we have the will to succeed? Right. So I will get up and do this podcast. I will grow today. I will pivot and think about what's coming 6 months from now. And to me, that's all about taking charge of the first thing that we all can take charge of, which is the start. Right. Everybody sits there and waits for perfection versus getting out there and starting. And so Sisyphus is my guy. It's my mantra. And each morning when I don't feel like working out, or I don't feel like, sending the email, I don't feel like making that sales call, then that's the reminder for me.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that story of your strength, Rick, sometimes is maybe getting started, but not necessarily finishing well because you get maybe distracted, right? I have a tool
absolutely.
that I use called the Daily Compass tool that helps me limit those distractions in my life, helps me focus on the 3 most important things I need to get done every day. That's a tool for me that helps. And certainly we all have to have those tools, those things in our life so that we can take charge of the most important things, because not everything's important, right?
Right.
Paul, how about you, my friend? You're you got a ton of things you're having to take charge of right now. What are your thoughts about why it's important?
Yeah, I love this conversation. I think we could spend all morning just talking about this, because taking initiative is so key to to life, really, right? To taking charge. I love this idea of the 6-month picture. Being strategic minded is really what we're talking about. Initiative is that tactical play that you make, but knowing that there's a strategic impact later on. And it really is, taking charge is about taking initiative, right? And it's crossing that line. And you guys have already shared that. And I think you just said something interesting a moment ago, Mike, about the 3 things that are most important. So you got to be clear, right, on what needs to be done. And any one of us could go to the board and recognize there's 3 things that have to be done, but what needs to be done? What's the most important things, right? And so I love that idea. It's already early on. We got a tip and challenge for everybody. And I love that. I think leading yourself and others to go do it, right? So that's what taking charge is leading yourself. It's the first order of leadership, is taking charge. You take initiative, go do something. Despite the fear, despite the apprehension, you step forward through that, right? And in fact, if you don't face a little bit of fear and apprehension, you're probably heading in the wrong direction. You need to feel a little bit, because if not, you're probably coasting downhill. Rick said it earlier, everything that is worthwhile is uphill. And the beauty of going uphill is that you'll get uphill. You'll be able to see more. You'll be able to be more. You'll be able to go further and be able to have greater success if you climb that hill. Don't fall in the valley. Don't get in that pit. So take charge is also about getting out of your comfort zone, obviously, right? So you got to get out of your comfort zone. It's often against the status quo. You're doing things that other people aren't going to do. And that's what I love about Barb Stegemann. She did something. She saw something, and she said, you know what? I'm going to take charge. I'm going to go do this. Nobody else was doing it. In fact, a lot of times, even our best friends may tell us, I wouldn't do that. Why would you want that? Don't do that. And you get a little bit of pushback from loved ones. And sometimes you've got to go uphill, and uphill means you got to face some of your friends and say, hey, look, I know you don't think I should go do this, but I really believe in my heart this is what ought to be done, and this is what I'm going to go do. And again, Barb did that. Another person that I want to call out is Alex Smith. You guys are into football at all?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah,
I read that article this morning.
17 surgeries, man. Can you imagine?
The flesh-eating bacteria, right? So he has a horrible leg injury, has a normal surgery for that, and then there's some weird infection or bacteria that comes in.
Mhm.
They're talking about amputation of the leg. Yeah, Paul, that's a great story.
Mhm.
It's unbelievable. Here's a guy who shouldn't, and normally there's no way. That's an uphill climb, right? All those surgeries after a horrible injury 18 months ago, however long ago it was. And he's back playing again, and at the time of the airing of this podcast, I'm not sure what his status is going to be, but right now, as we record this, he is vying for a position on that team, the Washington football team. I can't name the team now because they don't have a name.
Now, Paul,
but it's an amazing story.
To be fair, though, when we broadcast, we do have to do this with integrity. So I think it's important for everybody to know that, you're a huge Washington fan, and therefore, the Alex Smith story is really, really big in your world.
Well, there's not a lot for us to get excited about. So that's just one of them. So, but I love that story because it's inspiring to me, and it's really about, perseverance, taking initiative. It is taking that first step, but then it's taking the next step, and then it's taking the next step, and you just keep going, and just to see how far you can get. Can I get up that hill? Can I make it? Can I go there? And, it really, and one of the things I would say, taking charge there's really a qualifier for this. There's a lot of things we could take charge for, and, but make sure of this one thing, that it adds value to other people. Because otherwise it's essentially a selfish motive, right? So think about the impact that you're going to make by doing that. Even Alex Smith, he's making an impact on his players, his family, this community. Really, all of us, we're inspired on this podcast, and that's adding value to other people. So that's some of my thoughts. But Mike, what do you think? I know you've already shared a couple of thoughts here, but land the plane on this topic right here.
So many different ways to go. Breaking or taking charge is a breaking average trait, right? When we think about breaking average, taking charge is a breaking average trait. And when you think about, it's like being a Washington football fan. That's a below average trait. But being Alex Smith, being Alex Smith, he has a breaking average mindset, right? And so cool that you brought that in, Paul. I just had to give you a hard time about that since I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan, and they're the reigning Super Bowl champ right now.
Yeah, and their quarterback was trained by who?
Yeah, I'm not even sure. I don't remember. I know Alex Smith is no longer a Chief, right? Even though I loved him. He was a fantastic guy. But taking charge, I think, is an area that I excel in. I'm not saying it's necessarily a great trait, but it is a trait that I have. And I love what you just said, Paul. It has to be about adding value to other people and not necessarily my own agenda, right? A lot of times, especially early in my leadership, taking charge for me was about just getting stuff done. Maybe it was a selfish agenda, but I believe it's the essence of leadership to really take charge. Somebody's got to step up, right? There's an old saying, lead, follow, or get the you-know-what out of my way, right? And that's what taking charge is all about, is leading. I had a leader one time that I'm a great follower. I've been in the military. I've had to follow some great leaders. I've had, lots of leadership roles or followership roles that I've been in. I'm a great follower as long as leadership is solid. I had a leader one time tell me, Mike, one of your biggest problem is you're not a good follower. And, and I just looked at him and I said, you're right when leadership is not strong. And I need you to lead. If you lead, I'll follow. But if not, then I'm going to step up and take charge. And that's kind of what taking charge is to me. It's deciding not to sit still. We're called by our Creator to lead, to see our purpose, to get moving in that direction and take people with us. And so you can look around the world right now and see all kinds of people sitting still, right? I mean, just look at what's going on in our political system and the supposed elected leaders who do nothing but act like fifth graders, right? They're not taking charge. They're pointing fingers, blaming each other, and not really serving and adding value, Paul, as you said, to the rest of the world. And so I don't want to digress too much and talk about that, but I'm just kind of setting the difference in that. Barb Stegemann is someone who saw a need, stepped up, took charge, and is definitely breaking average in the work that she's doing. Let's transition to our next kind of topic here. How do we teach taking charge? How do we transfer that to other leaders? Because that's so important that we have a team of leaders. Rick, what are some ways a leader can teach and transfer this idea of taking charge to them?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I see in a lot of the clients that I talk to, a lot of the people that I coach, is the perfection trap. And it's also with the timing trap that John had talked about, but it's this lack of being willing to, they need to know everything before they get started, right? And that's where that taking charge really needs to come in. For instance, most people are saying, well, I'm not going to start a business now because of COVID, or I'm going to, or I need to make sure there's a certain amount of money in my bank account before I get out there and start doing it, or I need to get enough clients to replace the salary that I'm making right now before I go out on my own. And there's always going to be an excuse. And as a matter of fact, I mean, if you even think about it, what organizations do capital planning generally, September, October. There was nobody September, October last year going, hey, let's run a scenario real quick where the whole country shuts down for about 3 to 4 months and just make sure that we're ready. No, things are always going to happen. There's always going to be things and issues and problems. And that's where taking charge to me really comes in. And I think people use imperfection as the reason not to go forward. But it's also, I think, a perspective game. When we start talking about perspective, for instance, I was coaching somebody who was getting into sales and selling their product, and they wouldn't make the first call because they were afraid that they wouldn't get the sale. And I was like, wow, you got a long way to go. There's going to be a lot of sales you don't get. And but they kept saying, well, I don't know what to say to this objection or that objection, and what if they say this, what if they say that? And so I had to switch the perspective from making the sales call to go out and get 100 no's, right? I want you to go track how many no's you get 100 of them. And the reason why I said that is because then they were doing it, they were practicing, they were learning, they were growing, and they may get their first yes. And it was around call 56 that they got their first yes, by the way. But the point being is that instead of saying, well, I've got to wait until I was perfect, is, well, at least I'm going to start so I can figure out what I have to learn to get better. And I think perspective and impact, but I want to bring this back here for just a second to Alex Smith. The impact of breaking average is absolutely incredible. And I think perspective can give us hope. But when that injury happened, who did we compare Alex to? Right? When they called it the Joe Theismann injury. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Joe Theismann injury was just as devastating, but it was also known as a career ender. And so what happens now with Alex Smith, not only breaking average for himself and his family and his community, Paul, I think what's interesting is the next time somebody gets hurt that way, it's no longer the Joe Theismann injury. It's now the Alex Smith injury, and the hope that that's not the end of their career or the next step for them. And so I think perspective's everything in taking charge.
That's good. Well said.
Yeah, so I love how you you brought that back into the conversation, Rick, because you just think 30 years ago an ACL injury was a career ender, right?
Right.
And today guys are back on the football field in less than 6 months after an ACL injury. And it's because of the medical practices that have broken average, right? They did not, instead of just kind of ripping the knee open and creating more damage to repair that, everything can be done pretty much microscopically now. And so, even our science and our ability to do surgery and in recovery has broken average from what we were 30 years ago. And it's just another great example of someone taking charge and saying, hey, we can do this better, right? That's what taking charge is all about. So thanks for bringing that back to the table. Paul, what are some ways you've got a big company that you're a part of a leadership team? We've been a part of some big initiatives. What are your thoughts around transferring the idea of taking charge?
Yeah, I think transferring is the most important thing, and it starts first with yourself, right? You have to model it. You have to show it. You've got to be the representative of what it means to take. I mean, if you're asking other people to take charge and you're not taking charge, then it's not going to happen. So you got to be the one. It starts with you. So I think also it's encouraging other people to take that initiative. I like how Rick was talking about the fact that people are going to fail, and it's okay. You need to be okay with people stepping forward and realizing they're going to fail, because failure leads to success. You can't get to success unless you've gone through failure. Right? Seth Godin says it doesn't count unless you can fail. So knowing that, I think it's important for us to, as we try to transfer this and teach this to other people, to realize, hey, you know what? They're going to struggle. They're going to go through a little bit of difficulty, but that's okay, because they're going to learn from that experience. And I can be there to encourage them, to applaud them. And I want to applaud them and encourage them as much as I can, and also help them, maybe coach them a little bit when they're going through some struggles, and say, hey, oh, cool. What did you learn from that? What do you think is another way that you could do to improve that? And not being judgmental in a negative way, but just being helpful to say, to help them explore the different options that they can go for in terms of making that impact. And they'll learn from it. It's how we've all learned. We've all learned from our mistakes and our failures. And so why not encourage other folks, even though they may be not doing it 100% right, encourage them to do it, and catch them doing the things that they are doing right, and acknowledge that, give them kudos for that, give them affirmation. Most people love languages, 5 love languages. Most people, the number one love language is words of affirmation. So make sure you keep that in play. What's the love language of those that you're leading? If it's words of affirmation, make sure that you have that. It's usually it's not never number 5. It's usually number 1 or number 2 or maybe even number 3, but you can use that affirmation. One of the things that I read recently is that lots of people never use their initiative because nobody ever told them that they could. And that's why I think it's important for a leader to be able to say that, hey, look, go do it. Because most leaders don't tell them that. Most leaders aren't encouraging somebody to take initiative. And my wife wrote a book that I love the title of it. The title of it's called Permission to Be Bold. And it's really on this whole concept of giving ourselves permission to take that step, to make that impact, to be bold. You have permission to be bold. No matter how you feel, no matter what fear you're feeling, you have permission to be bold. Give yourself permission. Give yourself permission. And I love that idea. Be you, play the lead role in your own story. Play that lead role in your own story. Alex Smith took the lead role in his recovery because everybody said to him, there's no way, you can't do this. Nobody's done this before. And Alex said, well, you don't know unless you try. I'm going to try. I'm going to see what I can do. And he went down to, I think, Texas and went to, wounded warriors, people who had lost their legs, and talked to some of the doctors and people who were recovering there. How did they recover? He was seeing other people who may have not been on the gridiron in the football field, but were in life trying to find a way to make that next step, even with an amputee leg. And he figured out how to do this. And he's like, I'm just going to keep learning. I'm going to keep learning. So, those are just a few thoughts on that. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, I think, what you just shared is so key, right? That Alex Smith, he got outside of the normal circles of athletes, right? And he went and learned from other people. That's breaking average, right? Being someone who's willing to learn from others who maybe are in different spaces than us, that helped him, create a new mindset and shift. I think, when we think about transferring taking charge to others, number one, Paul, you said this, the leader has to be the example. I think of my son. He works at a golf course here locally where we live, and his boss is I gotta be careful how I say.
He could be listening. He could be listening there.
Trust me, Rick. He's not listening to the Breaking Average podcast. He's not.
He ought to be. Somebody should give him take initiative
He
and
should
tell
be,
him
but-
about this podcast.
But my son's boss is a below average. He's not even an averagely. I mean, he'll literally text the guys that work for him and say, "Hey, I had a late night. I was out too late. Doing what he does at night. I need somebody to open up for me, in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning." He'll text them like at 5:30 and want them there at 6:30. And of course, these kids, my son's 19. He's maybe asleep at that time. And we were at the gym at 5:30 one day this week when he got that text. My son's up with me at 5:30 in the morning working out, so he got that text from his boss. But see, he's transferring below average effort, right? This boss is transferring below average effort, yet he's wanting to hold the team that he employs accountable for above average effort to be better than they are. And so I think the number one way as a leader to transfer this idea of taking charge, you got to be an example. Whatever you model, John Maxwell's law of the pitcher, right? Whatever we model, that's what others around us are going to also demonstrate or give back to us. So I think the leader has to be the example. The leader has to prepare ahead of time and prepare, for that pushback to gain that buy-in from the team. And then the leader has to be willing to equip others on the team to take charge of small things, hold them accountable to executing on these little responsibilities, and then coach them up and cheer them on. Kind of like what you said, those love languages, Paul, to coach them up and then cheer them on as well when they do well. So that's kind of the ideas of transferring this. We have to, number one, be a great model and example for that. Any final thoughts before we wrap up this segment?
This is exciting. Again, we could spend all morning talking about this. I think it's such an important topic, and we want to invite our listeners, share your thoughts on taking initiative, taking charge, the importance of it, and maybe there's some examples, some stories of others. And I know you've got an inquiry for everybody on that. So,
yeah. So if you're listening to the Breaking Average podcast, well, number one, thanks for being a listener. We enjoy what we're doing. We enjoy adding value to the world, but we also want to talk to leaders who are breaking average, who are breaking the status quo, doing something different, kind of like Barb Stegemann shared with you today. And we want to invite you to let us know about them. Go to breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader. Also, wherever you're listening, on whatever platform, leave us a comment, leave us a review, tell us what you think, and give us some thoughts about your own breaking average stories as well. Paul, it's time to kind of wrap up our podcast. Rick, great interview you had with Barb. Thanks for adding value to us. Anything you want to add before we let you go?
Yeah, I enjoyed Paul when he brought up the love languages and dovetailing that back to Barb Stegmann's return on love, right? And a lot of people talk about return on investment and net present value and all these different things, and Barb's big focus is return on love. And while some people may feel that's touchy-feely, I love that connection. I hadn't made it before, of the return on love to the 5 love languages, and making sure that you're employing that, especially the words of affirmation to your team as part of the leadership. I thought that was a great call out.
Yeah, that's good. We always love to close out our podcast with a tip and challenge for our listeners. So Paul, why don't you give us your tip and challenge today?
Yeah, I came across this tip and challenge from Tony Robbins. So credit to Tony Robbins. Tony, thank you. And here's the tip. He says this. It says, success comes from taking the initiative and follow up, persisting. All right. So that's for part A. All right. Success comes from taking the initiative and follow up, persisting. Doesn't mean that you won't fail. You probably will fail, but through failure, you'll find success. All right. So remember that. So here's the challenge. And he asked the question, what simple action could you take today to produce a new momentum towards success in your life? What simple action? Doesn't need to be complex, doesn't need to be long and laborious. What action can you take? Simple action can you take to produce a new momentum towards success in your life? And I'll just add this one little thing here, and it kind of ties with what Rick just shared. As you're thinking about that simple action, think about this thought too. Let your light shine brightly so that others can find their way out of the dark. Something my wife shared that I thought was powerful in her book, Permission to Be Bold. And it is about breaking average, Mike, isn't it? It's about breaking average. And to break average, we've got to let that light shine brightly so that others can find their way out of the dark.
Yeah, that's there's plenty of dim lights or dark lights in the world today. So I love that analogy, Paul. I think the tip I'd like to share, and Rick talked about this a little bit earlier, is don't wait on the right timing. Timing is never going to be right. We have to create the right timing, right? That's what leaders do that take charge, is they make the timing work, whatever that is. And so many leaders today are waiting for COVID to be over, or waiting for this, or waiting for that, waiting for the government to say, okay, you have permission to take charge now. And I want to challenge leaders that want to break average to don't wait on the right timing. Create your own timing. And here's the challenge. Pick something. Pick one thing. This ties into kind of what you said, Paul. Pick one thing that you have delayed or been waiting to implement. Just one thing, not the 100 things. Look, we all have hundreds or thousands of ideas or things on our to-do list. I have a to-do list that's a mile long, right? But pick one thing that you've been delaying or waiting to implement, and then begin to communicate that with your team. Begin to communicate like a soft launch. Get ideas, get feedback, get pushback, know where your challenges are going to be, and then set a go live date, and then take charge to make it happen. It's that it comes, from desire, right? From Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill's. What is your desire? Pick a date, and then say, okay, we're going live, and then just start making it happen. That's what taking charge is all about, Paul.
Love it. Love it. I'm just so thankful for this time today, guys. Thank you for this. It's always helpful for me. I wrote lots of notes today. Hey, we want to thank Discover Next Step, who is our sponsor of today's broadcast. If you're wanting to get out of your comfort zone, if you realize, you know what, I got to take charge, and you want to create a greater impact, then reach out to Discover Next Step. Look no further than them. They have a customized road mapping, coaching, team building, really some great ways to do some team building with your team that will suit your needs. And this can all be done virtually. So just visit www.discovernextstep.com.
Yeah, so good. Thanks, Paul. Great conversation today. Rick, thanks for joining us and providing a great conversation with Barb Stegemann. And I enjoyed this idea of taking charge. Once again, we're inspired by the idea of breaking the status quo, breaking average, and leading your teams to the next level. Join us again next time on the Breaking Average podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R Squared Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.